We'll go ahead and get started. We have a very, very, very special guest with us today, Mr. Frank Figures. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the recent removal of the state flag. But before we really dive into that conversation, just a little bit about our special guest, Mr. Figures. Mr. Figures is somebody that has worked on civil rights and human rights issues for years. He's worked with the Jackson Human Rights Project, but he also serves on the board for the Veterans of the Mississippi Civil Rights Movement. And currently, he works as a strategy consultant at One Voice, and he's also a school board member here in Jackson for JPS. And he's also somebody that I have a great deal of respect for, somebody that I learn a lot from. So we're glad to have him here. Welcome, Mr. Figures.
Thank you, sir.
All right, so we'll go ahead and get started with our questions. We know that the state legislature just recently voted to remove the state flag that contained the Confederate battle insignia. The vote was 92-23 in the House and 37-14 in the Senate. And then Governor Tate Reeves signed the bill into law. So we know for a lot of folks across the state, that represented a historic moment and also a well overdue moment. So the question for you, Mr. Figures, what was your initial reaction when the state flag was removed?
Well, my initial reaction, but first let me just say thank you for that kind introduction. I wish my wife and daughter were here to hear it, but I'm afraid since they aren't, I'm still gonna have to take out the trash in the morning. But my initial reaction to that, as you said, it is long overdue. In fact, it's probably something that never should have happened anyway. But I was glad that it did happen, as a lot of other people, and I was glad that I was on the right side of history of it happening, because it showed that a substantial number of people in the state of Mississippi want a better Mississippi. They want to live a better life. And that flag was an indication of a life that wasn't good. That flag was an indication of a day and a time when our people especially were exploited for free labor. And then once the free labor system ended, then another system developed of cheap labor. And out of that cheap labor came a lack of complete citizenship. Although we had worked hard to end the free labor system, for in not too long, the non-enslaved population had established a cheap labor system and degraded citizenship for over half of the population of the state of Mississippi. So that flag was an indication of their victory in doing so. Although the significant number of people that were affected adversely by it struggled continuously to change life, to make a better life for themselves and their posterity.
Yeah, and I think that's worth mentioning. The fact that we've had this flag, since 1894, not too long after slavery ended, and so you have 250 years of people being enslaved, and then you have another 100 or so years of Jim Crow and second-class citizenship. And then you have the era of mass incarceration and redlining and so forth. And so that flag embodies all of that. And so I think that's why it represents such that, such a historic moment, and overdue moment in the state's history. So thank you for that, Mr. Figures. And so the next question is, from our prior conversations, I know we talked the other day about this, that you've been involved in some faith-based efforts to produce change around the flag, and other issues through collective prayer. So can you kind of elaborate on that some and talk about what are some of the faith-based efforts that you've been involved in to kind of produce that change, the power through collective prayer, and what it means to you?
Well, I'd be happy to do that. In fact, let me just expound perhaps in depth on one initiative. And being a social justice advocate and activist yourself, that there sometimes exists tension between the social justice community and the faith community. Now, it's a great tension because the social justice community sees the faith community as needing to do more. The faith community, on the other hand, sees the social justice community as needing to be a part of them so that they can do more. So that tension exists, and a number of people are aware of it. Now, one thing that happened that kind of thrust me into it, in 2015 in June, I guess for about 5 years or 6 years before that, I had been, for maybe 8 years before that, I had been doing civil rights tours. And I do one tour of the Masonic Temple, and then I do another tour. The tour of the Masonic Temple is called Stories and Secrets, and another tour that I do is called Everything Medgar. So there was a group from Charleston, South Carolina, that was led by a preacher, pastor named Dr. Nelson Rivers. Now, Dr. Nelson Rivers had been on the regional and national staff of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. But he had stepped away from that and answered his calling to be a pastor. And he pastored a church in Charleston, South Carolina. And he was more than a pastor of one church. He also, you could say, pastored a community, because every year for the previous 2 years, he would lead a group of people on a pilgrimage, a civil rights pilgrimage from Charleston, South Carolina. Now, this pilgrimage would be interreligious, interfaith, interdenominational, intergenerational, and interracial. And it was about 120 people. So on June the 27th, 2015, he had about 120 people come to the Masonic Temple. Now, they had been to Selma and Montgomery, Alabama the day before, and the day before that, they had been to Atlanta, Georgia. And they came to the Masonic Temple, and I conducted a tour for them, and then we left Masonic Temple and went to the Medgar Evers home. From the Medgar Evers home, they left me and went to Philadelphia, Mississippi, and from Philadelphia, Mississippi, they went to Memphis, Tennessee, to the Civil Rights Museum there. Now, while they were there, they got the word that somebody in Charleston, South Carolina, in Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church had come to a prayer service and murdered 9 people. So for all practical purposes, most of the people left the tour, abandoned the tour, and went back to see about their fallen comrades and their families. Some of the people continued on. But our response, the then president of the Mississippi State Conference of NAACP was Derrick Johnson, And he came to me and he said, well, you know, we ought to do something about this flag that we have. It had been a movement in South Carolina to remove the flag for many years before this terrible thing happened in 2015. The state NAACP in South Carolina wanted the flag removed, and they had called for a national boycott of South Carolina. But Derek Johnson came to me and said, we ought to do something. And here's what I think we ought to do. We ought to get a group of religious people to pray for 24 hours around the governor's mansion. Just every minute, have somebody pray in there for 24 consecutive hours. Well, we wasn't able to do that. But what we were able to do was to begin a series of prayer vigils of faith leaders here in Mississippi and in Jackson in front of the governor's mansion. And we did that. And in that prayer vigil, it was similar to the initiative, the pilgrimage in Carolina, in South Carolina. It was interreligious, intergenerational, interfaith, interracial, interdenominational. So we had, initially we started off with 500 to 700 people would gather in front of the governor's mansion each Thursday and pray for an hour. And then we'd go our respective ways back into our lives. And then the following Thursday. And we did that for 184 consecutive Thursdays. The numbers were big at first, 200, 500, 700 people, you know, but then sometimes it would just be 2 or 3 people. But the record is where 2 or 3 are gathered. And the people of faith know that it doesn't really matter about the numbers when you are dealing in something like a prayer. So 2 or 3 or 500 or 700 would gather. And these people would represent all of the faith denominations, Christian denominations that exist. The Baptists, the Presbyterians, the Catholics, the Lutherans, the Episcopalians, the African Methodist Episcopals, the African Methodist Episcopal Zions, United Methodists, you name it, they were there. But not only the Christian, but it also represented the Islamic faith community was present. The Hebrew Israelite faith community were present. The Rastafarian community would be present, you know, on various occasions. So it just didn't matter. People of faith would gather in front of the governor's mansion and pray. But in addition, when the weather was so inclement, they would gather in churches in the area. The church right across the street from the governor's mansion is St. Andrew's Episcopal Church. And they served like the church, if it started raining, you know, we could go over there and finish out the vigil, or if it started raining before the vigil, we could go. But not just St. Andrew's, but Pratt United Methodist Church, Pearl Street AME Church, just all of the churches from Ellis Avenue all the way to downtown would be the site of a prayer vigil. And so people did that, and they did it consistently until it just, you know, was not sustainable.
And when y'all would gather for these prayer vigils, what did y'all pray for, Mr. Figures?
We prayed specifically for that God would touch the heart of the then governor to remove the flag, because we knew that it was in the power of the governor to say, by executive order that we won't use this flag anymore. So we would pray that God would touch the heart of the governor to remove the flag, or the legislative body to remove the flag. Now, in sessions like that, I need to say this. It was so much. It was prayer. Absolutely, it was prayer. But it was so much more in it. So much in addition to prayer. Like for instance, there were Mississippi history lessons in these visions, in these vigils. Now, the Mississippi history lessons, we'd allow anybody that was on program, rather than to just come up and start praying, they could make some remarks, some introductory remarks, however they were so led, and then lead that into prayer. I remember one vigil, there was a lawyer, a white lawyer, a Presbyterian, Dorsey Carson, apologized to everybody present, and in his apology, he said that he hated to do this, but he thought that it was something that ought to be done. And what he did was he actually read the Articles of Confederation, the Articles of Secession from the state of Mississippi. Why did Mississippi secede from the United States? And when he read it, most of the people that heard him really didn't believe it. And a lot of the people were amazed that they could go through school in Mississippi and go through college and not have even heard about a document called the Articles of Secession, less known of what it contained as to specific reasons why. There was another gentleman that came and prayed, and he came a number of times. And I think he went to Pearl Street or was associated with Pearl Street AME Church, but he was a colored troop reenactor. That he worked a job, but that was his hobby, dressing up like, in Mississippi, in 1861, at the beginning of the Civil War, over 20,000 enslaved Africans self-emancipated and joined the United States Army and fought with the United States Army against the Confederate States Army. 20,000 right here in Mississippi. And he would tell these stories before he prayed about the colored troops in the strong stand that self-emancipated Africans took against the state of Mississippi, against their enslaver. And so they became learning experiences. On another vigil, a young lady, when she was in college, was involved in a book project. And this was probably in the late 60s. And she went to Millsaps College, but she grew up in Jackson and graduated from Jim Hill High School. And this book project led to a textbook of accurate Mississippi history. The name of the book was Mississippi Conflict and Change, and it gave a more accurate rendering of Mississippi history. But she stood up on a number of occasions and talked about the content of that book, and that informed a number of people about Mississippi's true history, how it came to be, who was who, what was what, in the issues that have plagued Mississippi for so long. This young lady, Dr. Jeannie Middleton Harrison, she serves on the school board right now. But do you know the result of that was that her book in 19 by it was published in 1974, and I think by early 1980 it was banned by the state of Mississippi. State of Mississippi
Oh, wow.
didn't want to show its true history.
Wow.
So all of these things were taking place at the prayer vigil, and a lot more.
Wow, that's amazing. And so, Mr. Figures, what do you think this moment and everything that y'all were able to do with the prayer vigils and it ultimately leading to this moment? What do you think this moment means for us moving forward? We know that it took a bipartisan effort to remove the flag, with the state legislature voting the way that they did, and then the governor signing it, the bill into law. But do you think that type of effort, that type of bipartisanship, is sustainable? And will this momentum that's been created over the past month or so that we've seen because of the Black Lives Matter protest and so many other events that have transpired over the past month or so, and really since this pandemic started, do you think this momentum will carry us over and it will finally lead to us being able to dismantle systems of inequity and being able to replace them with systems that honor the value of all people?
I'm glad, Mr. Campbell, that you used the word sustainable. I look at things like this. There are high moments in a struggle, and this is a struggle. It's a long, protracted, continuous struggle for equity, justice, and inclusion. Or it could be just summed up for a better life and a fair deal for people. But it's long. It takes a long time. It's protracted. It's spread out over a long period of time. And in a struggle like that, there are high moments. In where we are today, in July, on the third day of July, this is a part of a high moment in that struggle. The governor in the legislature acting the way they did is certainly a high moment in that struggle. But then there are also longer moments than high. Now this high moment has been going on now about 40 days, consistently and continuously. And this 40-day long high moment has opened up some windows of opportunity that can be accessed, windows of opportunity that can allow some better things to come in, to usher in some better things. But there are sustaining moments. And what we've gone through, someone said that he wasn't the state conference president in 1993, but he signed on to a lawsuit that was filed to take down the flag, to sue the state of Mississippi so that they could remove the flag. Now that lawsuit perhaps could have been a high moment, but then it wasn't until 2000, that happened in 93. And then in 2001, there was an election. That lawsuit led to an election. And that election leading into the election, was a high moment. But then that between 93 and 2001, and then 2001 until 2020, a few days ago, all of the things that have been done to sustain, to keep us going, to prepare us, to get ready for this high moment, needs to keep on going. In fact, the window of opportunity that's open is allowing us to do even more than we were doing to sustain us until the next high moment comes. For instance, one of the there was a nonprofit that was very helpful in these 184 continuous consecutive prayer vigils. That nonprofit is One Voice. So One Voice came into existence in 2005, and 2005 as a result of the disparities that the winds of Hurricane Katrina blew off and exposed. So now this pandemic, this COVID-19 pandemic has blown off silently, but have blown off and exposed a whole nother, and in many instances, the same disparities that Katrina exposed. So the sustaining role of One Voice in these sustaining moments with this Mississippi Black Leadership Summit, where it seeks to bring leaders together around the state of Mississippi, elected leaders, and provide information to them that's necessary for them to be able to operate better in when the high moments come, and to be able to sustain themselves better. The Mississippi Black Leadership Institute that looks for emerging leaders from 25 to 45, people that in their respective communities are emerging, are developing leaders. And it provides them with training and experiences that they will need in order to sustain communities and to be able to take advantage of when windows of opportunity do open. So there are sustaining moments, and then there are the high moments. We're at a high moment right now, and I hope it lasts. But a lot of times, you know, just like we started off with 700 people in the prayer vigil, and then it went down to just a few. That we started off, every city, every major city in the country was advocating for people, in every major city was advocating for justice and equity and inclusion. And even people around the world in South America and Africa and Europe were advocating for justice and inclusion at this high moment. But then it's getting less and less coverage, and it's involving less and less people. But the door of opportunity that it has opened, we're getting a chance now to talk about some things that we haven't been able to talk about on the level that we're talking about. We are now talking about disparities as it relates to healthcare, disparities as it relates to voting rights, disparities as it relates to the criminal justice system. Oh, and let me just say, that was a wonderful article that you wrote in the Clarion Ledger that came out in Thursday's Clarion Ledger.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Figures. Thank
you. It really was. You need to be the one talking. You
know, no. I'm just a student. I'm here to listen and learn from you.
I'm old and wearing out.
No, we need you.
You fresh. See, that's, sustaining in a high moment. So it's giving us the chance to talk about education and some of the critical needs in education, how we need a better information system, how we need better and more accurate information as it pertains to education. Also the climate, how we need to be able to talk about and respond to the climate inequities that exist in this country and in Mississippi. Now, let me say this too, Mr. Campbell. Make no mistake about it. The flag was coming down. The flag was going to change. Is You know, it ain't no way you can cut it. And here's one reason why. We're urging people now to participate in the census of 2020 so that historically undercounted areas can be counted, can get full counting, full participation. But as it is now, by 2023, I believe the voting age population of the state of Mississippi will be primarily that of people of color, primarily people of African descent. And by 2030, the whole makeup of the state is going to change. Perhaps the legislative makeup in 2023, when that election comes, can be, would have been of such that we could have got a flag change in 2023. But then we need, there are 600,000 people in Mississippi that don't have access to health care. Right. We need that to change. Perhaps this legislature that's coming in 2023, based on what the census count and how the lines are going to be drawn in 2021, how the state is going to be redistricted in 2021, is going to determine that 600,000 people that don't have access to health care now can have access to health care. What about the fully funding of education, of public education, rather than resegregating education based on high wealth districts, low wealth districts, and no wealth districts? What about fully funding public education? That's an opportunity that exists. In an open access to voting. What about that? That's an opportunity that exists. That since this high moment is here, and since we're developing a way to talk about it that we haven't been able to talk about it, or this opportunity has enabled us to be able to talk about in a way that we haven't yet talked about it. Yes. What about Mississippi having the workers having a livable wage? A livable wage, not a minimum wage, but a livable wage. People in Mississippi are being underpaid for their work, for their labor. People in Mississippi has sold itself as a low wage state and invited everybody to come in that want to pay low wages to people. But I'm glad that this window of opportunity is opened up, because it's going to give us an opportunity to advocate and demand for livable wages, for fully funded public education, for open access to health care, expansion of Medicaid and health services, make health to write great public policy. The way that Medicaid is written in Mississippi, Mississippi also has more amputations than any other state per capita, the population. And do you know where those amputations take place primarily? In the same map that they use to show where the Africans were dispersed in Mississippi and exploited for free labor. And the same map that they use to show where the historic undercount is among people in Mississippi is the same map that they use to show the number of amputations. And the people's limbs are being amputated simply because the system that exists now doesn't provide for the type of examinations that will help you to save your limbs. The amount of resources that people make on jobs doesn't allow them to eat the quality of food. In your article, you mentioned, in your article Thursday, you mentioned food deserts where people don't even have a way to get 5 miles and beyond to get to where fresh foods and good wholesome nutrition exists. So all of those are windows of opportunity that this removing of this flag has opened up for us. And it's an even larger number of people like yourself that are coming to ask questions about how can we do this? How can we get this done? Who do we need to align with? Who do we need to collaborate with? Who do we need to form a collective group with?
So what is our role as people or as organizations that are in this space to make sure that window doesn't close? To make sure that we bring as many people as possible into the fold, that we don't operate within a bubble, because if we operate a bubble, then it becomes the movement is no longer sustainable. Then if we're just spreading information and talking to folks that already know the facts. So how do we expand the bubble and incorporate more people where we're able to say, hey, these are the issues and this is how you can act on the issues. This is how you can be a part of this movement for change, a part of this movement to create new systems and new institutions that treat people the way that they should be treated.
You've had, I think, 5 of these programs before, where you've communicated with thousands of people on a Friday evening at 4 o'clock. And you've communicated with people all around the state of Mississippi. A lot of people have a lot of information that needs to be shared, that needs to go out to a broader audience. This audience that you have amassed in your role with the Mississippi State Conference NAACP is a great way to do that. Now, this sustainable moment is going to be more and more people like yourself are going to be doing just what you're doing. And I don't think that you're going to stop doing this just because the cameras have gone away, just because the pandemic has now become under control, so to speak, and people might resume their normal life. I think that you're going to be using what you have to do what you can wherever you are. And that's what movements are about. It's about ordinary people doing what they can with what they have wherever they are, making that information that they have amassed and acquired available to as many more people as possible. Whether it's a large group like the group that these programs are reaching, or whether it's a small group within the church that you attend, within the Sunday school that you go to, within your casual and social moments, at the barbershop, wherever you find yourself in interaction, and then thinking about the best ways that you can communicate this information that people are more likely to accept. It's a science to messaging, and I see young people now are just become masters of that science. It's stuff I've seen in the last 6 weeks that I haven't talked about in 30 years.
Yeah, I think folks are surprised of themselves with some of this stuff.
I mean, who would have thought 3 months ago that somebody accused somebody of looting, and then a person would have got up in response to being accused of looting, talked about how people have been looted for their labor for all of this time. And then here's somebody else get up and develop a map of the continent of Africa and show how it's being looted today of its vast resources, gold and diamonds and oil and chrome and bauxite and all of these precious minerals. I mean, people ain't thought about that since the movement to free Nelson Mandela. So, I mean, these opportunities are there, and people are ready, and they are stepping into them. And it excites me. It really does excite me that they're doing such things. Here's one thing that happened during those 184 consecutive prayer vigils. People participated. They wasn't just from Jackson. People came from as far north as Columbus and Starkville and Louisville and Oxford and Tupelo and Greenwood, and as far west as Greenwood and Vicksburg and Natchez, and as far south as Ocean Springs and Pascagoula and Gulfport and Biloxi, Hattiesburg and Petal and Purvis and Macomb, as far east as Meridian and Forest and Newton and Carthage. But they didn't just come in front of the governor's house on those Thursday evenings and pray. They did pray and they participated, but they went back in their respective communities and they shared the information that they had gotten when they came to this event, to these prayer vigils, and they began to do things to transform their community. I'll tell you what, an exciting thing happened this past November with the election of the current governor. Mississippi changed from red to purple. And one of the things that had to do with it, there's more than just one now, but one of the things that had to do with the change from red to purple, I would suggest, is that these prayer vigils touching so many people in so many places in Mississippi, and those people going back and working in their respective communities with their people to look for a better life and a fair deal. And they voted in that way. That's why the Mississippi had been ignored, you know, in terms of national elections and statewide elections. That people had just accepted Mississippi where it was, that it was forever gonna be the way it always had been from its existence, but not so. People are willing now to go back and work in their communities and work with people that they know, that they have a relationship with, that they can relate to, and talk about things that will make a better Mississippi for all of the people in Mississippi. So that's a sustaining moment. And that's one of the things that Mississippi to change from red to purple. So there's going to be, in 3 years, there's going to be another election. And let me just say this. I think maybe Congressman Benny Thompson said it the best way that it could have been said. I wish I could say it exactly like he did. But he said, when you get the richest fella in the state of Mississippi saying that the flag need to be changed, when you get the largest businesses in the state of Mississippi saying that the flag need to be changed, then, you know, you gonna get something. I had a person that's a member of the church that I attend said last Sunday, after the Facebook and conference call service was over, this person said that it was about the money. Mississippi is willing to do anything to protect the flow of money. That's what this person said. Not and that's essentially the same thing that Congressman Benny G. Thompson said. So Mississippi, people of Mississippi, doing what they can with what they have, wherever they are, can make a difference in the state.
Thank you, Mr. Figgis. Thank you for that. Appreciate you. Like I said,
Sir,
can you hear me, Mr. Figgis?
I can hear you now.
Okay, yeah. And I apologize. I got disconnected there. My Wi-Fi is obsessed up here. But we want to thank you for being with us today. We decided that, hey, we want to do a conversation on the state flag. We can maneuver the state flag. We were like nobody better than Mr. Frank Figgis. So we just want to thank you for being with us today. Thank you for your presence. Thank you for always being somebody that's able to provide valuable information. And we just also want to thank everybody for tuning in today. We want to thank you. And we'll be back next Friday for another conversation to be announced. But we would also like to send out a special thanks to our state president, Mr. Robert James, and our executive director, Dr. Corey Wiggins, the One Voice executive director, Mrs. Nashambi Lambright Haynes. And we hope everybody has a great remainder of their day. Thank you.